the slow mercury poisoning, the suffocating gold leaf, the suffocating bronze that hardened over days. Every method required one thing. The victim had to be conscious. If they passed out too early, the ritual failed. If they died too quickly, the soul escaped. The suffering wasn't a side effect. It was the mechanism. The transformation only worked if the victim experienced fear, awareness, and surrender while the metal encased them. This also explains why executioners forced victims to speak, pray, or cry out through tiny breathing holes. Their words weren't random, they were part of the ritual. Their final pleas were believed to anchor their consciousness to the metal. And here's the part nobody wants to talk about. Before we go deeper into this nightmare, like the video, share it forward, and subscribe for the next chapter. Some priests claimed that after the ritual was completed, the statues remained alive. They reported faint whispers at night. They swore they saw eyes shifting behind the thin films of gold or bronze. They described warmth radiating from statues that should have been cold metal. A few claimed they heard scratching sounds from inside, long after the execution should have ended. You might think these are myths, exaggerations, religious fear tactics. And maybe they are. Or maybe they aren't. Because some ancient statues, the ones displayed today as perfect examples of Roman artistry, contain organic compounds that shouldn't exist in bronze or gold castings. Not hints. Not theories. Chemical fingerprints. Microscopic remains of skin oils. Traces of bone ash. Compounds consistent with slow suffocation inside metal. And when museums are asked about these findings, silence. Always silence. The final recorded golden or bronze transformation happened in 542 CE during Justinian's reign. Not because the empire suddenly developed a conscience. Not because they recognized the horror of what they were doing. The ritual ended because priests reported too many disturbances. Too many whispers. Too many statues that seemed to move slightly when the room was dark. Too many guardians that felt, according to one priest's written confession, angry. But even after the bans, the rituals didn't disappear. Underground monasteries recorded secret uses of metal binding ceremonies for centuries. Some Renaissance sculptors studied these ancient techniques not to learn artistry but to imitate the lifelike expressions captured during those final moments of terror. And once you know that, you can never look at ancient statues the same way again. Those wide eyes frozen in eternal shock. Those faces twisted into subtle pain. Those lips parted as if trying to speak. Were these artistic exaggerations? Or were they copied from people who died this way? Now here's the part that connects this ancient horror to us. The Romans didn't invent brutality. They simply learned one fundamental truth about human nature. People will watch anything, if you make it beautiful. Mercury maidens shimmered like silver goddesses while their minds dissolved. Gold victims glowed like divine beings as they suffocated. Bronze prisoners became breathtaking statues while screaming behind sealed metal. Beauty didn't disguise the cruelty. Beauty made the cruelty consumable. And before you think, well, that was ancient times, we're better now, ask yourself this. How different are we? Today, violence is live-streamed, replayed, analyzed frame by frame. Movies glorify torture if it's framed with cinematic lighting. Documentaries turn human suffering into high-definition entertainment. We talk about the visuals, the angle, the color, the artistry, exactly like Roman spectators praising the beauty of a golden execution. We haven't outgrown the appetite. We've simply upgraded the production quality. The Romans fused brutality with elegance so the public could stomach the horror. We do the same thing, just with screens instead of amphitheaters. So next time you walk through a museum and admire a flawless ancient statue, pause for a moment. Look closely at the expression, at the eyes, at the tension in the face. Because some of those statues were never statues at all. Some people like to believe that death brings silence. A clean ending. A curtain pulled gently across the final moment of a human life. But when you stand in front of these ancient iron machines, the ones that once hissed, groaned, and screamed as they swallowed people whole, you start to question whether death is truly the full stop we assume it to be. Because if you look closely, really look, there's something unsettling hiding behind the rust in museum spotlights. The sense that some of these victims never truly left. And the thought that some might still be conscious, still trapped, still watching, isn't as impossible as you'd hope. We tell ourselves these torture devices are empty. We tell ourselves the souls inside them have dissolved into dust. We tell ourselves metal can't hold memories. But the ancients didn't believe that. They believed metal remembers. And yet, as twisted as this method was, the third one was worse. Because it didn't kill you in minutes. It didn't kill you in hours. It killed you over days. And the victims remained conscious long after they were no longer recognizable as human. In 79 CE, just weeks before Mount Vesuvius buried Pompeii, archaeologists in 1982 uncovered a chamber beneath the city's amphitheater. Inside were 12 figures standing upright, covered in thick bronze shells. At first, researchers assumed they were statues, ritual objects, artistic displays, or even ceremonial armor. But X-rays revealed the truth. There were skeletons inside. Complete skeletons. Perfectly preserved in poses of agony. These weren't statues. These were people, encased alive. The process was horrifyingly methodical. First, victims were coated in a paste made from bronze powder, sap, ash, and resin. Thicker than gold leaf. Heavier than mercury. Sticky, slow-drying, and claustrophobic. It hardened gradually, over hours, not instantly. And unlike the gold execution, where the audience watched a performance, this one was psychological torture. The bronze didn't suffocate victims immediately. Executioners left tiny breathing holes near the nostrils. Not out of mercy, but because the goal wasn't a quick death. The goal was consciousness. The bronze mixture cracked under pressure. Every breath created tiny fractures. Every tremor caused more cracks. Every desperate movement shattered the shell further. The crowd watched as victims broke their own prison from the inside, only for executioners to step forward and seal the cracks with fresh bronze. It became a cycle. Break, seal, break, seal. Until the victim gave up physically, but remained conscious mentally. Archaeologists found deep fingernail gouges carved into the inner walls of the bronze. Some tried to claw their way out until all 10 nails tore off. But here's where this method becomes unforgettable. The bronze took 68 hours, almost 3 days, to fully harden. During that time, victims remained alive, encased, motionless, terrified, and aware. So aware in fact that they could still talk. They whispered through the nostril vents. Begged for water. Begged for death. Begged for someone, anyone, to remember they were still human. Some spectators even carried conversations with the victims as the metal tightened around them. Imagine being trapped inside a metal shell. Listening to your own heartbeat echo. Feeling your limbs disappear from you. Knowing that the world can hear your voice, but can no longer see your face. This was the execution the Romans called the living bronze. And it was the closest thing the ancient world ever created to being buried alive while still standing. Imagine the horror of being trapped inside your own body, every muscle frozen, every instinct screaming, while tens of thousands of spectators stare at you like you're a museum exhibit instead of a living human being. That was the reality for the victims of Rome's final and most terrifying execution method. These people weren't simply killed. They were turned into something the Romans believed was sacred, something eternal, something that blurred the line between life, death, and art itself. And the worst part? We only discovered the truth because of a message scratched from inside one of those bronze shells. A message that simply read, "I am still here." Chemical analysis later revealed why. The bronze mixture used by Roman executioners wasn't pure bronze at all. It was laced with lead, resin, and toxins that slowed the victim's heartbeat while keeping their brain terrifyingly alert. These people weren't meant to die quickly. They were meant to remain. Their consciousness was trapped inside a metal coffin that just happened to look like a beautiful statue. And that was the point. Because what the Romans were doing wasn't just cruelty, it was ritual. For centuries, historians believed these executions were theatrical punishments, designed only for spectacle or political terror. But in 2019, Vatican archaeologists found something beneath St. Peter's Basilica that demolished every existing theory. Hidden in a sealed chamber were dozens of golden and bronze figures. Figures everyone assumed were ceremonial statues. Except they weren't statues. They were bodies. Human bodies. Perfectly preserved inside precious metals. At their feet lay dusty scrolls, ritual texts so disturbing that the Vatican kept them concealed for 3 years. The translations reveal the truth. These executions weren't simply punishments. They were divine transformation ceremonies. The Roman elite believed the soul could be bound inside metal. That a person encased while still alive would become an eternal guardian, a protector of temples, emperors, and sacred spaces. And suddenly everything made sense. Soldiers later admitted the method was so mesmerizing that they forgot it was torture, until the final stage when the victim's organs shut down one by one. When the silver goddess collapsed, the arena erupted. Not in horror. In applause. Because the beauty of the performance blinded them to the reality of the death. And that's exactly what the emperors wanted. This wasn't punishment. This was propaganda. A message carved into the psyche of every spectator. We can make you beautiful, and we can make you die for it. And the Catholic Church? They tried for centuries to destroy the records of this method. Not because it was barbaric, but because it blurred the lines between execution and idolatry. Between death and worship. Between human and divine. They buried the documents. They burned the scrolls. They censored the chroniclers. But they missed something. Because in 1982, archaeologists uncovered a grave that matched Procopius's descriptions perfectly, and everything historians thought they knew about Roman executions changed overnight. But that's the next part of the story. And trust me, the next method is even worse. While thousands of people roared with excitement, applauding the agony happening before their eyes, the executioners had a name for these dazzling, dying women. They called them Mercury Maidens, humans transformed into shimmering silver sculptures through liquid metal poisoning. The Romans didn't just kill their victims, they displayed them. But Mercury was only the beginning. Because what they created with gold was far worse. So much worse that even Roman historians struggled to describe it without trembling. And what made this method truly sickening wasn't the pain, it was how beautiful the victims appeared while dying. Before you take your next breath, understand this. The Roman Empire perfected the art of killing people while making them look divine. And the next technique turned living humans into golden relics, preserved forever in their final moment of terror. Don't blink. Because the next few minutes will make mercury poisoning look like mercy. Roman historian Cassius Dio, one of the most trusted voices of the ancient world, recorded every detail of this execution, though later scribes attempted to censor parts of his account for being too disturbing for the public. During the reign of Emperor Commodus, the spectacle began like a ritual. A victim, usually young, healthy, and chosen for their physical beauty, was dragged into the arena. But this time they weren't covered in blood or chains. Instead they glistened, not from water, but from a thick, sticky adhesive made from tree sap, animal fat, and resin, poured over their bodies until they looked like they had crawled out of a vat of honey. The crowd knew what was coming. The executioners approached with trays holding dozens of thin, delicate squares of pure gold leaf, each one lighter than a feather, thinner than paper, and cold as death. Piece by piece, sheet by sheet, the gold was pressed onto the victim's sticky skin. They covered the face, the chest, the legs, even the delicate spaces between the toes and fingers. Every pore was sealed. Every inch of human skin replaced with metal. Before the crowd's eyes, the victim slowly disappeared beneath a perfect, gleaming shell. The transformation was mesmerizing, like watching a mortal become a god. But this was no ascension. It was suffocation disguised as beauty. Here's what nobody tells you about gold leaf. It doesn't just coat the skin. It traps everything underneath. Human pores aren't useless. They're essential for releasing heat, moisture, and toxins. Without them, your body becomes a furnace with no way to cool down. Minutes after being sealed in gold, victims began overheating from the inside out. Cassius Dio described the victims as golden gods dancing their way to the underworld. But they weren't dancing. They were thrashing, jerking, twitching, burning alive under a layer of shimmering metal while thousands cheered. Their skin boiled beneath the gold. Sweat pooled into boiling pockets. Muscles spasmed violently as the body tried, and failed, to cool itself. Their hearts pounded at impossible speeds, slamming against their ribs like they were trying to break out of their own bodies. But what made this execution almost artistic in its cruelty? The gold leaf trapped their final expression. Their last moment, fear, shock, agony, became permanently sculpted on their faces. After death, the shell remained perfect. The Romans sometimes removed these golden faces and hung them inside villas as decorations. Imagine this. You sit down at a dinner party in a wealthy Roman home. On the wall beside you, shining in torchlight, is the preserved golden face of someone who suffocated to death while the crowd applauded. That's what Commodus called his gallery of gods. 47 victims. 47 golden sculptures. 47 perfectly preserved final screams. What happened inside Constantinople's hippodrome should have never been recorded. And yet, a handful of witnesses wrote it down before Byzantine officials tried to erase every trace of it. For 1,400 years, they almost succeeded, until one archaeological discovery in 1982 finally exposed a truth darker than anything you've been taught about Rome or Byzantium. Because what you're about to hear isn't just brutality. It's artistry. Execution redesigned as spectacle. Human suffering turned into performance. And if you think you're ready, you're not. Before we go deeper, see this clearly, these weren't ordinary punishments. Not crucifixions. Not beheadings. Those had become too predictable, too boring for crowds of 30,000 to 50,000 spectators craving innovation. The emperors needed something unforgettable, something that reminded every person inside the arena exactly who controlled their body, their breath, their fate. So they invented 3 execution methods so visually mesmerizing, so disturbingly beautiful, that victims weren't just killed, they were transformed. Living humans sculpted into art. And the first method? It killed from the inside out, slowly, poetically, and with a cruelty so refined it makes modern torture look primitive. Stay with me. Picture this. Constantinople, 312 CE. The hippodrome is shaking from the roar of the crowd. But they're not here for chariot races. Not today. They're here to watch a human being turned into a masterpiece. You're dragged into the center of the arena, chained to a marble slab polished so clean it reflects your terror back at you. The sun hits the stone. It burns your skin. Thousands of spectators lean forward, hungry for what's about to happen. Your executioner approaches, not with a sword, not with a whip, but with a bowl of shimmering liquid. It looks like molten moonlight. It's mercury. Not molten metal, liquid metal. And they're about to paint you with it. At first it feels cold. Almost soothing. A thin silver brush glides across your arms, your legs, your throat. The crowd goes silent as your body transforms into something otherworldly. Within minutes you don't look human anymore. You look divine. A silver figure. A living statue. The people call out in awe. Children gasp. Even soldiers stare. But this beauty is a lie. Because mercury does something horrifying the moment it touches skin. It enters your bloodstream. Not through a wound, through your pores. Within minutes it begins poisoning your nerves, destroying the mind before the body. The transformation starts subtly. Your fingers twitch. Your jaw trembles. Your hands begin to shake uncontrollably. To the crowd it looks like you're performing, like the statue has come alive. They cheer. They applaud your movements as if you're acting out a divine prophecy. But inside, something far worse is happening. Your neurons misfire. Your thoughts blur. Your heartbeat becomes violent and irregular. And then comes the drooling, long strings of silver-tinged saliva dripping from your lips. The crowd gasps, believing they are witnessing holy tears. They think it's symbolic. They think it's intentional. They have no idea that your brain is dissolving. One Byzantine writer, Procopius, described the moment the coating begins to crack, flaking like dried paint as your body convulses underneath. His writings were so disturbing that monks locked them in monastery vaults for 800 years. You remain conscious through everything. That's the design. The executioners had perfected this technique through decades of experimentation. They knew exactly how much mercury would keep a person alive. Not comfortable, not functional. Alive just long enough for the performance to finish. Too little mercury? The victim survives and the show fails. Too much? They die too quickly, spoiling the spectacle. But the perfected dosage? It keeps you trapped in your own dying body for hours. Procopius recorded one woman who survived 7 hours after the coating was applied. 7 hours of twitching, shaking, hallucinating, while 50,000 Romans cheered her slow destruction. 7 hours of becoming less and less yourself as mercury erased every memory, every thought, every instinct, until she was nothing but a shimmering shell. A sculpture dying on display. Here's the darkest part. Mercury doesn't kill like a sword or a spear. It kills by erasing identity. First goes your coordination, then your speech, then your ability to understand where you are. By hour 2, most victims had lost the ability to form memories. By hour 3, they could no longer recognize their own family members. By hour 5, they no longer recognized themselves. Your mind disappears first. Your body follows later. The crowd loved it. To them, this wasn't an execution. It was theater. A living statue entering a divine trance. They believed agony could stain iron the same way blood does. They believed that when someone died inside these machines, a part of them remained locked in the hollow chambers forever, echoing, whispering, replaying their final moment on a loop that never ends. And when I walked through the gallery this week with its polished floors and elegant guide ropes, I felt that. The stillness wasn't peaceful. It was watching. Think about it. A body crushed inside the Iron Maiden, bones splintering as metal spikes pierced skin. A prisoner screaming inside a bronze bull as the fire heated the chamber until their organs burst. A victim slowly suffocating in a sealed sarcophagus, their fingernails leaving desperate scratches that are still visible on the inside walls. What if the moment of death didn't release them? What if it imprisoned them? The Iron Maiden's faceplate always seems to tilt slightly downward, as if disappointed you survived when someone else didn't. The brazen bull looks like it's listening. The execution wheel vibrates faintly when you walk past it, even though it's bolted down, stabilized, and motionless. But maybe that's all in our heads. Maybe it's the power of suggestion. Maybe the human mind sees ghosts where there are none. Or maybe these machines are graves that never stopped grieving. And here's the part that truly unnerved me. The museum guide told me something they're not allowed to include in official tours. Something they only whisper to people who seem curious enough. Each year, a few visitors report the same thing. Different languages, different countries, different backgrounds, but the same story. When they place their hand near the metal, not touching, just close. Some swear they feel a tiny vibration. Not mechanical, not from footsteps or air vents. A pulse. Slow, thready, like a heartbeat trying to remember how to beat. And every time I hear that, I come back to one terrifying possibility. What if consciousness doesn't vanish the moment the body stops? What if it lingers, tangled in panic, unable to understand that the pain has finished, but unable to let go? Some of these victims might still be aware, still confused, still trapped inside museums people visit for entertainment. Imagine that. People buying tickets, taking selfies, walking casually past machines that may still hold the final breath of someone's nightmare. Imagine being the whisper no one hears, the scream sealed behind iron, the terror stuck in a loop, while strangers walk by saying, "Wow, this looks so cool." And then they leave. But the consciousness inside doesn't. That's the part of ancient torture that modern people never think about. The part that isn't written on plaques. The cruelty didn't end with death. It was engineered to last forever. Some civilizations believed that torturing the body wasn't enough. The real goal was to torture the soul. And if that's true, some souls might still be in those machines. Now, before you scroll to the comments and tell me which execution method disturbed you the most, you need to know something even darker. A few weeks ago, when I traveled to Rome to research this topic, archaeologists took me somewhere tourists are never allowed to go. Not just underground. Beneath the underground. Deeper than the animal cages. Deeper than the gladiator tunnels. Past the brick chambers where slaves waited to die. Past the holding pits where prisoners heard the crowd roar above them. They led me to a sealed section underneath the Colosseum, a place the public doesn't even know exists. And what they found there. What they uncovered layer by layer. changes everything we think we know about Roman cruelty. This wasn't entertainment. This wasn't punishment. This was ritual. A ritual so disturbing, so ancient, so deliberately hidden, that even the archaeologists didn't want to say its name out loud. But they showed me the evidence. Burial pits arranged in a circle. Hand-carved symbols etched into stone. Human remains found in positions no natural death could explain. Torches that had burned without oxygen. And dirt layers showing the victims had been buried alive. Not because someone wanted them dead, but because someone wanted them awake. When the team described what they found in those pits, their voices shook. One of them admitted he couldn't sleep for 3 nights afterward. And the strangest part? The deeper they dug, the warmer the ground became. Not from machinery. Not from the sun. From something else. Something humming underneath the stone. Something waiting. The lead archaeologist warned me. If what we found continues below the 4th layer, Rome will have to rewrite its history. And next week, I'm taking you down there with me. Into the chamber they uncovered. Into the darkness that was never meant to be disturbed. Into the burial circle ancient Romans believed could trap consciousness forever. Trust me, after what I saw in that chamber, today's story will feel like a children's bedtime tale. So stay subscribed, turn on notifications, and prepare yourself, because next week's episode, it doesn't end with a cliffhanger. It starts with one. Sweet dreams.